How's it going, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Operating Room. I'm your host, Kev Mahserejian, aka at RotoSurgeon on Twitter. Today's episode is going to be all about the James Harden trade, the big NBA blockbuster that just occurred, and breaking it down for fantasy purposes, and essentially what's going to happen with all the dominoes that fell across the league. The Cavs, Pacers, Nets, and Rockets were all involved. Plenty of fantasy-relevant players have been moved around. Plenty of picks as well, but we don't really need to discuss the picks as they're all in the future. They don't really affect us for the 2020-2021 season. So our main focus is Harden and all those ancillary pieces. Before I get into any of that, make sure to go check out RotoBaller.com for all of our great premium packages, whether that be for fantasy football, baseball, basketball, hockey, golf, MMA, video games, doesn't matter. If you want it, we got it over at RotoBaller.com. Use promo code KEV at checkout. That's KEV, K-E-V, for 10% off our premium packages that provide all our draft kits, strategy guides, etc. to help you win big in 2021 and beyond. RotoBaller.com, come check us out. Make sure to also go check out the Operating Room podcast on Apple and Spotify. Subscribe there, rate, review. First and foremost, James Harden is obviously now in the Brooklyn Nets organization. He's going to be playing alongside Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They dealt away backup shooting guard Caris LeVert, who's essentially their main sixth man. Starting center Jarrett Allen, who had just become the starting center. He'd taken over for DeAndre Jordan just a week or two ago. And so this team is completely turned on its head. Harden comes in, he'll slide right into the shooting guard spot. He'll take on his usual role. Kyrie Irving's still out due to health protocols for the most part. And until his return, we're going to see Harden in an even further expanded role than he was already in, than he was in with the Houston Rockets this year. As we saw, he was extremely passive playing on the Houston Rockets. He just did not care on offense or defense. He was even worse defensively this year than he has been in years past. Offensively, he'd been averaging over 10 assists per game. He was at about 11 this year. That should go down as he does take more shots. He's at about 16 shots per game. That should jump up to 20 to 22 as he has been in the past. Scoring can be in the low 30s up until Kyrie Irving's return. His efficiency has been fairly normal. His shooting percentage is about 44% from the field, about 36% from three. We could see that maybe even increase playing next to even better offensive contributors around him. Kevin Durant surely gets a boost having another initiator and ball handler on the floor. Kyrie Irving gets a boost with the same. Kyrie Irving also gets a boost within that same scenario as long as he's not so disgruntled that he's leaving the team to go to birthday parties or do whatever he does. So once this team is at full health, we're going to see the Brooklyn Nets as a three-headed monster dynamo. My guess is they're going to try to have at least 2 of 3 on the floor at all times. They're obviously going to start all 3 at the beginning of the first and third quarter and probably close out with this lineup as well. But for the most part, they're going to stagger and try to have these superstars kind of limited to where you can mesh different lineups together to work around each other and kind of maximize the roster you have, because they are kind of the Nets' depth is kind of lacking right now. They have some good backups in Bruce Brown, in Jeff Green. They have Joe Harris starting alongside the East, as I've mentioned, but for the most part, they don't really have much else to work with. DeAndre Jordan will see an expanded role at center. He should be picked up in most leagues. Jeff Green, he's more of a good DFS option than a long-term pickup. Joe Harris's value is unchanged. He's going to get some even more wide-open shots. Maybe it's more assists or whatnot, so I'm not too worried on that end. He was already a marginal fantasy option to start with. So I'm not really concerned about Irving, Harden, or Durant. Durant and Irving particularly are going to take rest days regardless. So this isn't a situation in which Harden's too affected by the superstars next to him. They're all going to have their boom days here and there. Harden's probably going to play the most games out of anyone. He might not play the first few games given due to COVID protocols, having to enter a new team facility and all that. But once he does get going, this situation should be fairly meshed. He's played with Durant before. Obviously, playing next to Irving when he does return is going to be difficult, given that they are going to have to share the ball in ball handling duties and whatnot, but they will figure it out as time goes on. Obviously, we have seen superstar situations fail in the past. Year one specifically, chemistry is an issue. We saw that with the Miami Heat in LeBron's first year when they lost to the Dallas Mavericks. But this situation is going to be a lot more interesting because it's very fantasy viable across the board. Their dud games will be supported by the boom games when one or the other is out. So this will all balance out. You can kind of eat those bad games, given that if Harden doesn't score as much as you expected him to, his assists will be high. Maybe his turnovers even go down, having to handle the ball less. It's going to all work out at the end of the day. He's going to average somewhere around 30 points per game and a near triple-double as well. He's not going to be at that 34, 36 point per game range as he has been in the past 2 years, unless something were to happen to Irving and Durant. But we can see all of these return top 25 fantasy value, even top 15 fantasy value, all three of them in a per game situation. But for now, it might be a little bit clunky to start, but it will get going as the season moves along. So that's pretty much it for James Harden. He's going to eat Caris LeVert's role completely and take on a little bit of Irving's while he's out. So everything will work out in the end. They have plenty of usage to go around given the lack of depth. And the center position is really what's most worrisome. They were fourth in pace already. They might be even at a faster pace moving forward. That's the Nets. Now we look at the Houston Rockets, who've put themselves in quite a precarious situation after acquiring John Wall for Russell Westbrook, adding DeMarcus Cousins to their team. Christian Wood was a superstar signing this offseason, even though he is still learning how to play defense. He's been fantastic on the offensive end. He's about 20 and 10 per game. He's getting you stats across the board, and he should remain unchanged, if not at a higher pace for his scoring. We're going to see DeMarcus Cousins a little more involved. He's going to take a few more shots with James Harden out of commission. James Harden's 30% usage will trickle down to Victor Oladipo and the rest of the team. John Wall is going to continue taking his maintenance days. Even Victor Oladipo will be taking back-to-backs off, as we saw with him not playing in a back-to-back. So with the Rockets, things will work out to where each player does eat to a certain extent. There's not going to be one particular player that does take a massive rise. John Wall has already been fantastic. He's been 18, 5, and 5 per game. He might go up to 27 and 6 or so, with the 7 being assists, so he gets a little bit of a boost. Victor Oladipo, he'd been averaging about 20 points per game. That might go up. His role from the Pacers to the Rockets should remain largely unchanged. He was already at a 26.7% usage rate. The Pacers and Rockets don't really move at much of a different pace. The Pacers are 14th, the Rockets are 16th. That could go up with Harden gone. It could go down. We don't really know as of right now. This is such an odd team. Their primary pieces are essentially John Wall, Eric Gordon, Victor Oladipo, DeMarcus Cousins, Christian Wood, and Danuel House upon return, but House is going to be out for an extended period of time. But for now, Wall, Oladipo, Cousins, and Wood should all see a bit of an expanded role. They're all going to remain fantasy viable to a certain extent. DeMarcus Cousins at the moment is available in 47% of Yahoo fantasy leagues. I'd consider him as a speculative add. Maybe he gets up to a double-double per game. He takes more shots. He's averaging fewer than double-digit shots per game as of right now. That could go up to 11 or 12. He could be really good with blocks, threes, points, rebounds. He might hurt you in free throw and field goal percentage, but for the most part, you do want someone like DeMarcus Cousins on your team, even after all of the injuries. John Wall, he's probably owned. Victor Oladipo's owned. Wood is owned. You can't really do anything about that. So Cousins is really the only free agent beneficiary. Now for the Pacers acquired Caris LeVert in exchange for Victor Oladipo. This seems like a one-to-one swap of shooting guards. We are not going to see much of a changed role for Caris LeVert from where he was taking on the usage for Kyrie Irving. He was about a 30% usage rate. That could dip down to 27, 28 to where Victor Oladipo was with the Pacers. His averages should remain roughly the same. His percentage, his efficiency might actually go up. He's at about 43.5% from field goal range. That could jump up to 44, 45. Could be a little more fantasy viable there. His stocks are kind of low right now. He's at about 1 steal, less than 1 block per game. We could get that about to 1.5 and 1 per game. He's low-key very capable on that end. He's just been so heavily used on offense. He's probably gassed getting back to the other end of the floor. Now with the Indiana Pacers, he's going to get to play next to a potential Defensive Player of the Year this year in Miles Turner. He might have an easier time on the defensive end there, having a lot more covered by Turner. Brogdon next to him. Brogdon's a solid defender as well. So LeVert might actually get some easier backcourt matchups. So I'd look for his stocks to potentially take a jump as well. For the most part, LeVert is owned almost everywhere. Owner shouldn't feel any sort of way for LeVert because his change in any way is going to be marginal. He's still going to be very relevant for fantasy purposes. I doubt he sees a jump in his role to where he reaches superstar status unless something were to happen to Malcolm Brogdon, because he was playing very well. He had a 40-point game not so long ago, and he played very well next to Kevin Durant. So on a team that likes to spread the ball more in Indiana, he will be getting more open shots given how well the offense operates and puts players in good positions to win. So I'm hopeful on LeVert. The loss of Oladipo, this is actually kind of a boost for the Pacers because LeVert was playing better than Oladipo this year. They're already a pretty good team. They might get even better. There's not really anyone to add here. Justin Holiday might take a hit. Malcolm Brogdon, Domantas Sabonis, Miles Turner, none of them are really changed by this move given how well LeVert can act as a ball handler and initiator, more so as a complementary guy to Malcolm Brogdon. Now there's the fourth team in this deal, and that's the Cleveland Cavaliers. They kind of came out of left field, and they got to acquire Jarrett Allen and Taurean Prince for one of their late first-round picks, I believe in 2022. This situation is very odd for them, given that they do have Andre Drummond on the roster as things stand. Drummond has been a fantastic big this year. He's been just as solid as they come, but he did miss this past game with injury, or maybe even they were fielding trade offers for Drummond and left him out because maybe something was on the stove, and that's why they traded for Allen, a young center under control that they can sign long-term and have around the building, because this Cavaliers team is super young. They have Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, Isaac Okoro, Chetty Osman, Larry Nance, but now they just have a plethora of bigs in JaVale McGee, Andre Drummond, Jarrett Allen, and even Kevin Love when he returns. So right now we are in a weird situation with the Cavaliers. Jarrett Allen loses a ton of fantasy value while he has to play with Andre Drummond. If Drummond were to be traded, Allen's ceiling expands enormously. He forced DeAndre Jordan to take a DNP coach's decision in his last game as a Brooklyn Net. So we could see a similar situation in Cleveland with the role all to himself at the center position with just a meager backup like JaVale McGee. So Allen, his prospects as of right now are kind of bleak, but they are really banking on an Andre Drummond trade. Kevin Love is probably going to return in 2 weeks, but they can kind of coexist as Kevin Love is a shooting power forward who can play the center spot, and Allen's more of a traditional center. So that's something for the later time to figure out. Right now, Andre Drummond is the real blockade. There are some rumors that the Toronto Raptors are looking to acquire Drummond to fortify their center position, but that might just be smoke. Right now, we have to consider this as a rough situation for Allen owners. You just kind of have to hold on and hope for the best. Andre Drummond's probably unaffected. His minutes might go down, but Allen's just going to probably take over JaVale McGee's role in the short term. It's really unfortunate that this kind of situation occurs, but that's the risk you take when you buy decent players on bad teams. So this is just what goes down. A low-key winner in this deal is Taurean Prince because he's been let free of the shackles of Brooklyn playing behind Kevin Durant. His usage had dipped down to 18% from the low 20s. His minutes have dropped down from 30 minutes per game in the past to 18 minutes per game this season. So Taurean Prince should return to 25 to 30 minutes per game. He should be a double-digit scorer, about 5 or 6 rebounds per game, maybe a steal and 3 per game as well. So he's someone you should be looking for on the wire. His field goal percentage will hurt you, but his free throw percentage is really good. He should be averaging about 2 shots per game from a free throw, maybe even 3. So Taurean Prince, solid fantasy contributor at the end of the bench. At the end of your bench, pretty good streamer for the most part. Probably a better streamer than a hold guy. I'd be looking at Taurean Prince if I needed someone to take over a wing spot in the future if someone were to get hurt. We just saw Gordon Hayward go down with his hip strain. If that were to be more serious, someone like Taurean Prince is a good fill-in for him. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Make sure to go like and subscribe to the RotoBaller YouTube page. Again, I'm Kev Mahserejian at RotoSurgeon on Twitter. Subscribe to the Operating Room on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Rate and review, like I said before. And thanks again for tuning in. Talk to you guys next time.